All right, today we're diving into the life of Mahatma Gandhi, a figure most people think they know, but I think we're going to find out there's a lot more to him than just that peaceful image. We've got some excerpts from his Wikipedia page here, and trust me, it's a fascinating story.
Oh, absolutely. Gandhi's story is one of contradictions, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a lawyer for a good while, spent something like 21 years in South Africa before he became a leader in the Indian independence movement.
It's wild, right? So let's start at the beginning, his younger years. I came across this description from his sister. She said he was restless as Mercury.
Really?
Yeah, always on the go. And get this, arranged marriage at 13.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
I mean, different times for sure, but
Yeah,
makes you wonder how that kind of tradition shaped his outlook.
totally. And on top of that, he had some real struggles too. Sexuality was a challenge for him, and then his parents died when he was relatively young.
Right, yeah, that
Yeah,
can really change someone, how they see life, death, their place in the world, all of that.
definitely. And then, a big turning point, he moves to London to study law.
Ah, so that's where he gets exposed to all those Western ideas then.
Yeah, totally new philosophies and ways of thinking.
It was actually in London,
Yeah.
that he takes that vow of celibacy, which we'll get to later, but his relationship with that vow, well, let's just say it evolved along with him.
Interesting. So then he goes to South Africa, arrives there, ready to practice law, and boom, immediate discrimination.
Oh, yeah, I read about this. Thrown off a train, kicked into a gutter,
Mm-hmm.
forced to remove his turban,
Even.
even. And these weren't isolated events either. This was constant systemic racism.
It's hard to even imagine. And this is what really sparks that political fire in him.
He couldn't just stay silent.
Right. Had to
Mhm.
fight back against that kind of injustice.
So he starts working for Indian rights in South Africa, right?
Yeah,
And it's there that he really develops the skills he'll use later in India's independence movement.
absolutely. But here's where things get, well, more complex. His views on race, they change over time. Early on, he's focused on discrimination against Indians. And he even uses language that would be, well, totally unacceptable today.
Ah, yes. There are those early writings comparing Indians favorably to black Africans,
Yeah.
even using some derogatory terms. It's uncomfortable to read, for sure, but it's part of his story.
It makes you wonder, right? How could someone who becomes such a symbol of equality hold those kinds of prejudiced views?
It is a real question. But I wonder, too, if facing that kind of racism himself in South Africa, if that forced him to confront those prejudices, to actually change his thinking about equality.
I mean, you have to think that played a role. He was living it, seeing the human cost of those beliefs.
Yeah, it reminds us, I think, that people are products of their time. And that growth, real growth, well, it's a lifelong process. Even someone like Gandhi had to grapple with that.
Absolutely. So he goes back to India in 1915. It's a whole different place than when he left.
Right, the independence movement is really gaining steam. Big moment in history.
And Gandhi, he jumps right in, joins up with the Indian National Congress.
Becomes a key figure right away.
Oh, yeah. But what's interesting is that his approach is so different. He's not talking about violent revolution or anything like that.
No, he's all about nonviolent resistance, this idea of satyagraha.
Truth force.
Right, exactly. It's more than just passive resistance, though. It's about actively confronting injustice, but through things like non-cooperation, civil disobedience,
Mm.
always grounded in truth no matter what.
So powerful, that idea.
And you really see it in action with the Salt Satyagraha,
The Salt March.
1930.
This is huge.
Absolute pivotal moment for India.
So Gandhi and 78 volunteers, they set out on this march
240 miles
to the coast, to Donati.
to protest the British salt tax.
So can you explain this salt tax thing a little? What was so important about salt?
Well, salt was a basic necessity, right? Everyone needed it. But the British, they had this monopoly on salt production. Indians couldn't make or sell their own.
So it was a symbol of British oppression, of
Yep.
how they controlled the economy.
Exactly. And by focusing on salt, Gandhi made it a protest everyone could relate to. Rich or poor, you needed salt.
And it wasn't just about making salt, right? It was the act of defiance.
That nonviolent resistance,
Thousands of people joined the march as it went,
it really galvanized the movement.
and the world was watching.
Oh, yeah. You had American journalists there reporting on the British police brutally cracking down on these peaceful marchers.
It really shifted global opinion.
Definitely.
So the Salt Satyagraha, it showed the world that nonviolent resistance could work.
It inspired so many other movements. The civil rights movement in America, for example. Martin Luther King Jr., he drew a lot from Gandhi.
Incredible impact. But India's path to independence, it wasn't smooth sailing from there.
Not at all. Lots of internal divisions,
Right.
political maneuvering going on. And then World War II throws another wrench in the works.
Right, and Gandhi even had a complex relationship with Ambedkar, too.
The leader of the untouchables, Ambedkar, he recognized Gandhi's commitment to social justice. But he also criticized his approach to caste discrimination, felt it wasn't enough to really address the deep-rooted oppression of the untouchables.
So even within the movement, there were different perspectives.
Absolutely.
And then there's the Quit India movement in 42, demanding immediate independence from Britain right in the middle of the war.
Which some people
Yeah.
criticize, right? Worried it would destabilize the war effort.
And even with Gandhi's commitment to nonviolence, there was still a lot of violence during that movement.
Yeah, it shows how difficult it is to maintain peace when the other side is willing to use force.
Makes you wonder.
Can a truly nonviolent movement succeed against that?
Big question. And then, of course,
Yeah.
you have the partition of India and Pakistan, a whole new chapter of pain and upheaval.
Right.
Yeah, the partition, 1947, India and Pakistan. Just a horrific event. So much violence, so many people displaced. And Gandhi, he was completely against it.
He really saw it as a failure,
Mhm.
like a betrayal of his vision for India. Hindus and Muslims living together peacefully, and then to see all that violence erupt. Millions displaced, so many lives lost. It really devastated him.
He never wavered, though, did he? His commitment to peace?
Never. It's remarkable, actually, when you think about the chaos of that time. He fasted multiple times, trying to stop the violence, to bring people together.
And it probably did save lives.
I think so. His presence, his willingness to put his own life at risk, it had a real impact.
But then, of course, January 30th, 1948, he's assassinated.
By Nathuram Godse,
A Hindu nationalist.
who believed Gandhi had betrayed the Hindus
Huh.
by being too accommodating to Muslims during the partition.
It's a tragic reminder, isn't it? That even someone so dedicated to peace can still become a victim of hate.
It is a real tragedy.
His final words, "Hey, Ram,"
Yeah.
just so powerful.
Yeah, but even in death, his legacy lives on. Satyagraha, Himamsa Swaraj. Those principles, they still offer a way forward for social change, for personal transformation.
He wasn't perfect, though. We talked about his early views on race.
Right, and his struggles with celibacy
Hmm.
and the criticisms from Ambedkar.
But his commitment to truth, to justice, to nonviolence, it's still so relevant today.
Absolutely.
I think his life shows us. That change really does start with each of us.
It's about those everyday actions,
Mm.
speaking out against injustice,